My presentation is going to be a bit less technical than the previous speakers, and I don't want to bore you with numbers, schemes, and so on. I think that this conference has put together a great number of experts in the field, and we have the representative from the main jurisdictions who can explain in detail the programs. You've heard some of the presentations so far. The purpose of my talk is more about approaching citizenship not in exactly the choice of program, but rather in a more holistic fashion and choosing a program which is right for you, not only just on box being ticked here and then. So it's what is it that we are buying? We are not buying a high-definition TV, okay, and comparing which one is best. Fortunately, our business is not on Amazon yet. So I want to approach that from a different angle and more, what is it exactly that we are acquiring when we are acquiring a citizenship? So first, let's start with some simple numbers and to see what is the size of our market. Is that the next one? So I think we all agree that we are in a growing market. Why? Because there are more and more conferences around the world talking about this topic. I have another business which I've been running for 20 years, organizing conferences. And I think my first client in the business was about 15 years ago, and I've seen the number of companies promoting the services growing ever since. There was an article in the BBC, which was dated June 2014, that was evaluating the size of the market as $2 billion a year. I did a little research. These figures by the way, was based on an interview with Gelin, the founder of Henleys & Partners. And I did a little research, and my numbers come closer to 5 billion. It also depends, obviously, what kind of programs we include in that. But I think that what's been happening lately is the growing number of schemes coming from Europe that are very attractive, that has brought a lot of money. If you look at Cyprus and Malta alone, bring 1.5 billion euros a year. And that's including, obviously, the investment, including the fees which are being paid to professionals. So it's 5 billion sounds big, but in fact, it's still a very niche market. Because what is 5 billion? If you think about all the citizenship that are brought out there. If you compare that, let's say, with the market capitalization of Google or Apple, which are respectively 600 and 800 billion, I think we have a very long way to go before we become anything significant on the world stage. In terms of number of people, my guesstimate is 7,000. We're in a field where there are no exact numbers. And as Woody Allen used to say, 94.5% of all statistics are made up. So don't take my number home and think it is the right number. But most numbers that you'll see out there are not very accurate. Mostly because it's very difficult to get information out of governments. Even the figures that they give you are not necessarily very accurate. But I would say that about half, maybe more than half of it comes from the Caribbean, and the rest, Europe and the rest of the world. If we compare that number to the number of, let's say, ultra-high net worth individuals in the world, according to the World Wealth Report, there are 240,000 ultra-high net worth individuals, so people who are worth over $30 million. And as we know, when you buy Dominican citizenship, you don't need to be ultra high net worth individual to do that. So again, compared to the global wealth, to the global number of wealthy people, it's still a very, very small number. And also, if you compare to individual countries, for example, do you know what is the rough number of people who have been naturalized in the UK last year? Any idea? It fluctuates, but it's about 135,000. So, I mean, those are not people who are applying for a citizenship program. They are people like me, by the way. I've been living for the UK for 27 years, and when I saw that the wind was changing, I will come back to that, I thought, okay, I may as well get my British passport just in case the French one is not enough. And so I got naturalized. But 135,000, so 7,000 people globally applying for getting a passport through a citizenship program is not a lot. Okay. Who is looking for citizenship, second citizenship? Well, we have, I think the clear winner are still the Chinese. And we have Russia and the republics, and we have the Middle East. They apply for different reasons. The Middle East mostly because it's very unsafe where they are. Russia, you could say, similar reason, though it's not that present. And Chinese, I think the Chinese are looking for mobility. They are looking also, as a jail-out card in case things turn sour. So these are the main nations, the main groups. Obviously, we have Nigerian applicants, we have applicants, we have American applicants, people who renounce the citizenship. And I think that Antica government actually got a few of them who want to stop paying taxes in the US. So there are many, many different reasons, but those are the main suspects. Why are people looking for a second citizenship? The reason I'm covering that very briefly because I want to go back after to the basics of how to choose a citizenship. Well, you read many, many reasons. You can be very granular about why one should because you want this, you want a bit of that. But in fact, it comes down to three main factors. And those factors can be standalone factor for some people, or they can be a combination of those. And there could be some factors that are actually not right now, but you worry that things could be needed. Mobility. Mobility, I would say, is the first the first reason people bought a second citizenship. I think that when St. Kitts started the program, I think it was in 84, sorry. It was mostly about mobility. Mobility, so the proverbial visa-free travel. But mobility is not only about traveling visa-free, it's also about being able to live in a different country, either now or in the future. Security. Security has two sides to it. Security is how we feel, how safe we feel in our own country, okay, in terms of kidnapping, ransoming, blackmail, and so on and so forth. Security for the family. And also it's about the fear of ending in jail if things turn sour. You don't need to be in many of the countries that I've mentioned before, and I don't want to get any bad press on any of these countries, so I'm not going to be specific, but there are situations when you can get on the wrong end of the political regime. You have benefited in the past, and suddenly you are persona non grata, and you are stuck. You can be stuck by not being able to move. We can be stuck worse by ending behind bars. And I would say the growing factor, which for me is what will lead to the next, is a better future for the family. I think now the citizenship A real citizenship program for me is something that looks at the family, not a sort of selfish move of someone who wants, which can be legitimate, by the way, but this is really the type of clientele that we should be after, those who are looking a better future for the family, and I will come back to what it is exactly what we talk about. There was the speaker from 2 speakers ago, was talking about Dominica, forgot his name, Nouri. Very good presentation, by the way. He was talking about the press that we have in our sector. There is a lot of press, people talk, it's more open. Yes, it is true. A lot of people talk about citizenship and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, it's not very positive. Let's face it. No, when you see, I'm not talking about specialist publications, but when you see an article in the press, in something like The Guardian, for example, there was an article published a month ago, you know they are not looking for good news. So they take typically an oligarch who's been caught in Cyprus, and there were some dodgy dealings. We don't know. There is nothing very, very specific. But as Mr. Katz said, nothing so far really tangible has come out of it. There is no terrorist who's coming from St. Kitts or Cyprus or Malta who has blown up any tower. But still, it's I have nothing against left-wing, but it's kind of the left-wing side of the press who is always trying to show the wealthy foreigners as dangerous people, and how do they dare applying for a second citizenship. Ironically, these are the same people, those journalists, they're all based in the West, by the way, who are benefiting from the privileges of a good passport. And I had an interview, I'm not going to mention the publication, and I said to the guy, I said, what would you do if you couldn't get any, just let's not talk about security, but if you couldn't get anywhere without a visa, how would you feel? It never actually crossed his mind, no? With his Swiss passport, he could go anywhere. So it's very easy to criticize. But the bottom line in this industry is that you have countries that want to attract wealth, and you have people who need it. So it's a win-win situation. And the due diligence in all of these countries is, I would say, second to none. And no journalist ever goes to a government and say, show me how you do your due diligence. They never do that. These articles are not researched at all. Little parenthesis, because I think this is something that really annoys me. Okay, so as you can see, my slides are not very figure-based. But when to make a decision? Well, as we say, not when the house is on fire. So when you're in business, you are very often approached by people who are in an urgent situation. And it's just so happened, I'm just going to mention someone I'm not dealing with because there is nothing I can do for him, but I know his situation. He is a wealthy Russian businessman, and he's stuck in the UK. So he's legitimate in the UK, but he cannot renew his passport because he's got a court case, which is going to be cleared, but it's going to take some time. Huh? It's all political. And now he's looking for a second passport. No one is going to touch him with a barge pole. Impossible. Some jurisdictions say, we can start the process, but you will only get your passport once you have renewed your Russian passport. This guy, I'm sure 1 year ago didn't think about it. So, okay, everything is fine. No. So you must make these kind of decisions. If you are an exposed person, you've got to make this kind of decision when you can make them, when you can get a police certificate, not when it's too late. So unless you may have to call Spider-Man, and that's not the situation you want to be in. it's not only about emerging markets, by the way. Not only countries. In fact, the tale of Brexit, the cautionary tale of Brexit is quite interesting because I was living in the UK when it happened, and I saw it brewing in quite an interesting fashion. And to be fair, most people didn't really believe, the foreigners, like me. We have a huge French community in London, 500,000 people. Really, I spoke to my friends. We didn't believe in it. We didn't believe it was going to happen. But it did happen. And then you've got a situation where those who were more second passport, suddenly how can I get a second passport? So you have two types of people who have been triggered by this event. You have the Brits, who are suddenly finding some Irish origins to apply for an Irish passport. Apparently, I read in the news, and that sounds an exaggerated figure, it's in the Independent, so you can't really trust them. But they were saying that 500,000 people apply for an Irish passport in the first 6 months of the year. It sounds a bit excessive, but anyway, it's a big figure. And so that's, on one hand, you have that. And those people who were thinking that, no, and we're talking about educated people. We're talking about, very good friend of mine, an accountant, he's looking at he's applying for a German passport because of German origins. And he voted for Brexit. That's the funny thing. And so you have also the other side of the spectrum of all the expats who were living in the UK, like me, who suddenly panicked and they started applying for British citizenship. Now it's very difficult to get it within any reasonable time frame. I have a good friend of mine. He's a very successful fund manager. He's French. He got his British passport 4 years ago. Finally, he's been living in the UK for 20 years. He finally decided that his wife and 2 kids should get the passport. 3 of them were refused. Why? Because they hadn't spent enough time in the UK in the last 6 years. So it's not only, it can happen to anyone. So what country, what investment, what time frame? Well, we all know that, and I'm not going to bore you with the numbers. Roughly, it goes from 120,000. I know it's 100,000, but when you pay your lawyer and your various fees, that amounts to 120 is really the cheapest in places like Dominica, to 2.8, which would be the typical, I'm talking dollars here, which would be typically the Cyprus deal. Could be a bit cheaper than that, depends whether there is VAT on property or not. Time frame from 3 months in the Caribbean to 6 years in Europe. 6 years in Europe in places like Portugal, where you have to wait 5 years before you can apply for a passport. So, and we are talking about countries with no residency requirement. A lot of confusion, especially with intermediaries, about residency requirement. I think when someone, for the first time, inquire about, they read some article in the press, they inquire about citizenship, and they don't understand. They see some very cheap programs. So you can get, you can get a Cyprus passport in Cyprus for 350,000. Yes, but you have to live there. So, we're talking about the Cyprus scheme who would give you a passport in 6 months. Or the Maltese scheme. There are very few schemes in Europe where you can, there are only 4. There's Bulgaria, there is Cyprus, there is Malta, and there is Portugal. So, I don't want to make enemy with the Caribbeans, and we, as SureX Capital, advise clients on the Caribbean. We work with St. Kitts, and we work with Dominica. And it serves a very definite purpose. But fundamentally, if you're looking just for mobility, which is a very, very good reason to get a passport, then a Caribbean passport will do the job. You can travel visa-free in most places. As the previous speaker, Nuri Katz, I think, mentioned before, said this treaty, by the way, are not for life. You never know. It can be revoked anytime. But let's assume, let's be positive. So a Caribbean passport will do a great job. But if for anything else, it's not totally enough. And passports are a bit like diamonds. They are forever. In fact, they are probably better than diamonds because you can pass them on to your kids, whereas diamond, if you have several kids, you may have to split it in several pieces. So I would like to just mention a few benefits of a European passport, which is quite unique and which is something that always one should consider. I'm not here to say Cyprus is better than Malta or Portugal. That's really down to how much you are ready to invest and how fast you want that to happen. But I'm looking at more the bigger picture. We want the best for our children. And I'm coming back to the lifestyle situation that Paolo mentioned before, which I think is very important. We want the best for our children, and best for our children is to provide them with a good education. I think it's one job that we have to do as parents, is to make sure that our kids can access the best universities. And again, granting a EU citizenship to your kids opens many doors. And once they are graduated, they can get straight onto a job. It's very, very difficult to apply for a job, even if you are qualified in Europe, if you do not have a permit to live. And of course, we want to care for our parents. Now, most programs include the parents. The parents don't really need a lot of mobility. I don't think that the visa-free travel has less appeal that it would have for the younger generation. But what is very appealing for the senior citizens is good healthcare. Because this is one thing that is a bit iffy in most emerging markets is healthcare. I mean, typically, a Russian would never really treat any serious stuff in Russia. It's a fact. It's also a place to live and retire. And again, I think that Paolo mentioned a very important point. It's all about lifestyle. It's about quality of life. It's about healthcare. And it's about mobility. Mobility in the sense of easy travel. Healthcare, you may think that it's a side issue for someone who is very wealthy because they can buy expensive private care, but you never know in life what the future holds. And you don't know for your kids. You're not sure they're going to be able to afford some fancy healthcare. And healthcare in Europe, traditionally, I mean, again, things could change, but you can get top-notch healthcare for very little. It's the basic healthcare system in Europe is excellent. Quality of life, well, no, we're in Cannes. It's a pretty cool place. And cool places like Cannes in Europe, there are, I won't say thousands of them, but there are a good hundred of them. Which again, you have this kind of flexibility as a European passport holder to enjoy that and to say, okay, I want to change climate. I want to try that. That's possible. That's not possible if you have a St. Kitts passport. Tax planning, again. I mean, maybe Paolo should have done this presentation because, UK, Italy. I'm just mentioning a few here of countries in Europe that offer non-dom regimes. I mean, they're not necessarily exactly non-doms, but they're all based on the UK model. I still put, by the way, UK as part of the EU because I hope it's going to stay there. But each one has got its own advantages. You can actually. What some people do, they move from one to another. So when 10 years, 15 years expire, they move on to somewhere else. I mean, you said in the UK at the moment. A lot of people have left the UK and moved somewhere else. They moved from the UK to Italy. They moved from the UK to Cyprus. Cyprus has got a fantastic non-dom regime where you pay hardly, very little tax. And it's super flexible. You only have to spend a couple of months a year. And even then, I don't think they really check how much time you spend there. So tax consideration, personal taxes, but also corporate taxes. If you want to run a business, Cyprus is a good place. If you want to, Luxembourg is a good place to run a business. Ireland is a great place if you are ready for rainy days, talking about climate. So I'm going back to my original slide here, is that we are not buying a car, we are not buying a TV screen. We are acquiring a citizenship. And I think it's quite important. Anyone who has several passports, normally we get quite attached to our passports. I've got 3 personally, and I feel pretty close to them. I've lived in all these countries, and you want to feel good about what passport you hold. It's what I would call the feel-good factor. Get the feel-good factor. You have to go there. I mean, if you're going to be a Dominican citizen, you really have to go there and check it out. If you want to become a Portuguese resident, again, you have to go there as part of the scheme. Very few days. But I think you've got to feel good about the people. You've got to feel that it's a place where you can live. Because let's not forget that you will always be able to live in the country of your citizenship. No matter what deal they have, if tomorrow, let's say, Cyprus or Portugal get out of the European Union, which is, by the way, possible, we've seen the UK, who would have guessed. It's not done yet, but it could go that way. So you always have to think about, is it a place, if push comes to shove, where I could stay? It's important. So for that reason, it's not necessarily a difficult choice, but a choice that's got to be made very carefully. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions. Thank you.
What countries now give possibility to get second passport without living constantly?
In Europe?
In Europe, yeah.
You have Cyprus.
Cyprus, Malta, I suppose.
Malta, Bulgaria.
Bulgaria.
And Portugal. Portugal is a bit of a different deal because you have to wait 5 years. You don't have to live there, but you have to spend, I think, a week. Someone, I'm sure there is a Portuguese expert there who can say. And also, there is a little caveat that you need to pass a language exam at the end. So if you are Chinese,
like in UK,
if you are French, it's going to be quite easy because Portuguese is quite close. But if you are Chinese, it's a bit of a work.
Okay.
Anyone, maybe there could be something I'm missing out there, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And
one more question.
Yes.
It's about the lifestyle aspect. In your view, how does religion plays part of the lifestyle issue? I've seen some advisory reports on religion, and that seems to become a more important issue within the lifestyle choice. Do you see that as well?
Funny you mentioned that, because I was just reading this morning an article in the Figaro talking about Jewish people in the suburb of Paris leaving Paris, not to go to Israel, but to go to other places which are safer, and they call it the internal aliyah, which is kind of funny. Okay. Yes, of course. I mean, religion is an important factor, and if you are a Muslim person, I think the UK is going to be a place where you're going to be feel quite comfortable, because there is a very strong Muslim community. I would say France is a very specific case because we're talking about a Muslim community coming mostly from North Africa. Yes, of course, so the religious element is very important. It's a difficult issue because you don't want to upset any religion here. But I would say definitely, Portugal is a Catholic country. Cyprus is an Orthodox country. Bulgaria, I guess, Orthodox. And Malta is a very Catholic country. Malta, extremely Catholic. I would say that if you are a Muslim investor, the choice of Malta would be a bit weird in terms of, unless you don't care about religion, but as a choice.
Thank you.
I wish you a very good cocktail party, and I hope to see you there later today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Additional question?
Just a little note on the Portugal, because
Yes.
it's not a citizenship program, it's a residency
It's a
program.
residency,
There
yeah.
has never been a person who actually granted citizenship based on this program, early days, 2012.
Yes.
It's designed to be a residency program, it's not attached to citizenship. The
Yeah.
citizenship rules as of today, it's more stringent than UK. You normally need to live 10 months. But for
Okay.
the program, which is residency program, only 1 week.
Okay.
As far as Malta and the Muslim component, if you visited Malta, I'm
Yeah.
sure you're familiar with most of the signs are in Arabic. The country's culture is partially Arabic as well. So I would
true.
also say
Okay.
maybe not directly a great
you-
place to be as Muslim, but it's not anti as well. I think
No,
you would
sure.
feel maybe
Yeah,
a bit
I know what
more
you mean.
different in Switzerland than Malta these
Okay,
days.
yes, good point. By the way, you're very right about the program in Portugal, but I included it because it's still the only program, the only other program that leads to citizenship without having to spend time, years in the land, as most other programs do in Europe. And as you rightly said, no one has got so far, because the time hasn't elapsed.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for that presentation. It was excellent. When you're doing your research and when you're looking at matching up programs against programs, how much of terrorism, small wars and large wars do you take into consideration when looking at geographical reasons other than the financial reasons?
You're talking from the investor's viewpoint?
As far as making a country a choice for residents.
Okay, so I mean, countries of choice for residents typically they do not have a terrorist agenda. You're talking about them accepting people coming from
looking at individuals that want to get away from, like people in the Middle East, for example. You
Right.
mentioned the Middle East. So when they look at a country, do they look at Europe and say it was too close to the Middle East? Or when it comes to China, do they look at things like, no, it's too close to America? Or do they look at Europeans looking at
I think-
Cyprus, too close to Syria? Do people take that into consideration?
I think in the Middle East you have two types of clients. You have the one who wants to get, who is still very active locally, who wants to get a travel document. So and you have the one who is the Syrian, the Iranian who is looking for a door out. And those people are very close to Europe, culturally speaking. So Europe is a perfect match.
But if push comes to shove and you have to actually take up that residency of a country where you've chosen to take a
Right.
residency, is the tyranny of distance a bonus or is it a disadvantage?
I think it's a bonus.
Is that what saying?
I think it's a bonus to be close.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.